All right, so we're moving from a love story to a death story, but I'll try not to bring you down too much. Um, so for most people, I think their first experience with death, with seeing death, is at a hospital, maybe at an open casket, at a coffin, something like that. My first experience with death was at a mall. This is not my first brush with death. That was crossing a train bridge in the middle of the night trying to recreate Stand By Me. But that story we'll have to tell another night. So we need a theme of trains or something. No, but this was my first time having one of these, oh my goodness, this is what death looks like in your face kind of thing. So what happened was, this was probably 10 years ago. Went to the mall, went to the movie theater, this is Shepherd Center, to go see some film. I don't remember what it was. I do know that it was primarily elderly people there, so I'm guessing it was either some re-release of It's a Wonderful Life or something like that, maybe a film festival. But so the way it was set up, you've got the box office sort of on the main floor of the mall, and then you have to go up to where the cinema was. And so this being a large mass of people, they were keeping us on the main level behind the stanchion velvet rope. They finally pull it back, and they let us go to proceed up to the cinema. And we're going to the stairs, and it's very, very slow. As you can imagine, it's all elderly people, walkers, canes. It's a huddled mass trying to get its way to whatever this movie was. So I'm looking over the crowd, over all the gray heads and bald heads, to the escalator, and wondering why none of these people are taking the escalator. And I see that there's somebody, a staff member, standing there and blocking it. It's like, oh, that's weird. Looks like the escalator's functioning, whatever. We get to the top finally, and as we turn towards the cinema, I look again at the top, and again there's a staff person standing at the top of this escalator. And with my height, I sort of peer over this person who's standing like this, like really sort of trying to block whatever's back there. But I peer over, and what I see is this slumped over body. It's the body of an elderly woman who's on the top of this escalator. And I it just passes just for a glimpse of a second. And I just sort of, go into the theater, don't really think about it. But it sticks in my head. I have this image now of what I perceive to be death, and I carry it with me a long time. I asked my mom, who was with me, if she had noticed it. She hadn't. So it was this private, almost embarrassing thing where it was like, should I have peered over what had happened? What, did I have a right to find out about that? And also, is this what death looks like? I was probably like 15 or 16 years old. So it was rather undignified. But one of the things that caught my attention at the time was that the escalator had not been shut off. So it's a little grotesque, but the steps, automated steps kept going up, up into the machine, and they would occasionally catch on her foot, her shoe, this lifeless shoe. And so it was just for a few seconds I noticed this, but it would catch and sort of drag it along, and then her foot would fall back, drag it along, foot would fall back. So I carried this with me for a very, very long time, and it became my notion of death, my notion being lifeless foot with shoes on it. I guess it's sort of the Wizard of Oz notion of death. But years later, I started to tell this story, and I started to tell it to people and talking about what was your first experience with death. And in doing so, a couple of things came to me, and really those are the things I came to talk tonight about. So the first is this decade-late sense of righteous indignation. The reason for this being that for the life of me, I don't know why the escalator was still on. It's that image, this horrible image that I have in my head, the eternally rolling escalator and this body being pushed by it slightly, should never have happened. It feels like maybe they rushed to sort of block the view of the public of what had happened, and they were more embarrassed about the fact that there was this person on the floor rather than trying to tend to this person. That's the sort of indignation that I feel now. And I just wonder, why the hell didn't they press that friggin', red emergency stop button to at least give that person the small sense of dignity, even if they couldn't, move the body until the paramedics came or something. But the other thing that came up as I was telling this story quite recently is I might be wrong. Like, I don't actually know if that person was dead. It was the first thing that came to my mind when I saw this person collapsed on the ground, but it was such a split second that, like, I don't know why as a teenager, this was my first thing. And admittedly, yeah, a lot of people, if you see someone sort of lying on the ground, that might be your first thought, but I never really took it any further to sort of look and check in on the person. I just walked off to the movie myself. So now I have this issue where my entire sense of what death is, and this image that I have of death as something being sort of very undignified, may not be true. And I'm not sure how to resolve that other than telling the story a bunch of times. I have thought of a couple of things about both these problems I was talking about. So the first question is, why did my mind go that way? I think probably because my image, the one sort of about being in the hospital and being surrounded by loved ones, when I was challenged by something that was so directly contrary to that, which was literally an elderly person in a very public place, quite literally not being looked over by any loved ones, that it almost scarred me. It was like, oh my God, death can happen anywhere. Forget about just, fainting or having a heart attack. This could be some awful thing that happens to you in a public place, and you just you become an embarrassment to everybody. But this other problem where I might be wrong, right? She may not have died. It may have been a seizure and the paramedics were coming, who knows? So in telling the story, retelling the story, rethinking the story, writing it out in advance of coming here tonight, the funny thing about memory is you can start fooling yourself. You can start, rethinking and going, well, did I remember that correctly? Or was there something that I missed? And so when I like to, and if you'd like to, you can choose to sort of get that sort of grotesque image I put in your head earlier out of your mind when I tell you that, yeah, actually, maybe it was the other leg that was moving. And maybe her eyes were blinking. And maybe I just this thing was so shocking to me that my brain didn't know how to process it. So this is the story that I invented. But the much stranger thing that's happened to me in retelling the story and trying to remember it is with this escalator, this friggin' emergency stop button. Why didn't they press the button? What happened in the situation? It's so unfair to this person. And I've been so working on trying to clear that from my memory and maybe try to find some explanation like, oh, was there duct tape over the button or something? But I'm telling you now, and this is true, as I'm telling this story, and as I was remembering this story today earlier this afternoon, I was trying to think, how do I end this narrative, and what is it? Is there anything that I missed in the narrative? But now that I think about it, and I'm just going to leave you with this, so hopefully you all sort of can clear that horrible image out of your brain. But when I think about it now, I think actually that I invented the escalator moving. I think I compounded the horrible image that I got with something far worse in a sort of moment of crisis, and that the really horrible part of this story that I've just come and shared with all of you, I actually don't think it was true. I think it was a dead escalator. So actually that's it. I'm going to leave it off at that. Thanks.